So here I have written few points from my own personal experience that should be included in the supporting information. It's sort of a small template in which I have divided the supporting information into parts and bits and pieces, and I will be explaining each part along the way. So just remember that in your supporting information, you're selling yourself. So you have to convince the reader that you're the perfect candidate for this job. Therefore, any achievements or any positive points, anything that can highlight you or separate you from the rest of the candidates, you have to write this information. You have space of almost 1500 words, so make sure you make good use of that. And by that I don't mean that you should be writing stories and you should bore the reader, but you should write eye-catchy statements and stuff about you that can really highlight you as compared to other candidates. Okay, so I have divided into few parts. The first part is the introduction. Okay, it would be like few sentences. You should first of all start with introducing yourself and then also explaining the role that you're applying for. For example, I'm excited to apply for the role of junior clinical fellow in emergency medicine at XYZ NHS Foundation Trust. Okay, and you should also acknowledge, this is a very important point, you need to acknowledge and then you need to demonstrate that you have read the person specifications and job description for the role that you're applying for, and also mention that you're confident that you meet the requirements for this job. So for example, you can write that I have taken my time out to read the person specifications and job descriptions and also the trust values, and I am confident that I would be the perfect candidate for this job considering the job description and the person specifications. Or you can say that I'm confident that I meet the requirements for this job. Just paraphrase in your own way. And any point to highlight here, because I think that can also sometimes get you shortlisted immediately. For example, if they require you to start immediately, even if you don't have visa, sometimes they have a very low threshold, they need people immediately. So if you can say that I can start immediately, or you, let's say you are in the UK and you have right to work, you are on dependent visa, you can highlight this point straight away, so that can get you like highlighted as compared to other candidates. Or you can, although gaps are not a bad thing, it's totally justified to have a gap, but if you have no gaps or you have x number of years of experience in a particular field, like you have 3 years or 2 years of postgraduate experience in medicine, that's a good point to highlight. So write a few lines about you in a sense, like your, what role are you applying for, what are any eye-catchy highlighting point in the start, and also justify that you have read the person specifications and that you are confident. And below, I will demonstrate how I meet the person specifications and requirements for this particular role. And then you're going to start justifying it. So you'll start with your clinical experience. And clinical experience, make sure you cater it according to person specification. So although person specifications, they should not take up that much time of yours to read, because once you have read a few jobs, their person specifications initially, you should be confident that you know pretty much what is written. And when you open a job, you don't have so much time to basically do your research and spend so much time. You hardly have half an hour to 1 hour to apply for a particular role. So I would not endorse spending like hours and hours on this process. You should have a pre-written person specification for the roles that you're interested in. For example, if you want to apply for medicine or emergency medicine, you should have pre-written supporting information. Just cater it a little bit according to the person specification. So just spend like 1 minute or a few seconds on reading the person specifications, and make sure that if any points that were not highlighted previously in your pre-written supporting information, you just modify a little bit about that and add a few lines. Okay, and although I have written this point a little down the line, but it's very very important. Clinical attachment, although it's not your, it does not guarantee a job, and if you don't have a clinical attachment, that does not mean that you would not get the role. So don't be disheartened if you don't have a clinical attachment, but just if in case if you have a clinical attachment, please mention it at the first in the clinical experience. Because, and in this way you can justify, like for example, if you talk about I have done a clinical attachment in emergency medicine for 6 weeks, also mention what you have learned from it. That's very important. For example, I learned about the clerking in the NHS, I learned about patient management and initial assessment, I learned about the triage, and I also assisted in small procedures like taking bloods and IV cannulas. I was involved in ECG interpretation and chest x-ray. I shadowed my consultant and understood the NHS system. So these are the things that can get you highlighted. Okay, and also for the role that you're applying for example, if you're applying for SHO role in a ward based job, you need to highlight that I have experience of, for example, during my F510 house job in Pakistan or India, I have experience of clerking patients, making discharge summaries, conducting ward rounds. I was part of on-call rota. That is very important. And addressing acute patient complaints. So what you used to be do, what you used to do in those roles that you were previously working at, you need to highlight those points. Now, if this is a, let's say, junior clinical fellow for emergency medicine job, you need to highlight what things you have done in emergency medicine. For example, I was involved in triage of patients, or I used to be the first responder for minor injuries, or I have worked in minor OT and I know how to suture minor injuries, or I have managed cases like ACS, initial management of ACS, or I manage. You can also give examples like I managed a case of SVT on my own and therefore received a lot of appreciation from my seniors. So anything that you have done, you can highlight that experience here. Also, again, told that you can give examples of performing in emergency setting. For example, if you managed a patient of ACS and received appreciation from seniors, so any examples that you can give according to the role that you're applying for would be amazing in this part. Next part, we will be talking about the skills that are required in the person specifications. We have read the person specifications already, and we saw that there was a list of things that were required from the applicant, which included communication skills, teamwork, leadership, management, blah, blah, blah. Everything was written there, and you can have a look at that. And now we need to address each and every point that was required from us. But how are we going to address that? Do we write some generic statements like, I have excellent communication skills, I have experience of teamwork, I am flexible with timings? No, we are not going to bore the reader, and anyone can write such generic statements. What we need to do here is we need to cater all of these points to our own personality, how we demonstrate these particular skills. For example, let's talk about the first one, which is the communication skills. Now, almost every job application will have this requirement, which is not just in English, but also general communication skills. General communication skills include active listening, giving the person time to speak, and then using a polite manner in order to address all of their concerns. So you can give examples. For example, during my house job, I used to explain complex diagnosis of the patients like COPD or heart failure in a way that was very simple. I used to simplify those diagnoses to them and communicate it to them in a way that they would understand them. Or you can say that I practiced active listening on the patients and any concerns that they have. For example, after their surgery, if they had any questions or concerns, I used to listen to them and then address their concerns. And also you can also if you have done any teaching, you can highlight it here. It can apply both to your English language skills and also to your general communication skills. For example, I taught complex cases like ECG and simplified them in a manner so that the students could understand them very easily. You can take examples from your real life and quote them here that basically show how you meet those particular skills. Then English skills. You can give very interesting examples. For example, my undergraduate degree, which is my MBBS, was in English language, and I gave all my exams and vivas in English language. The medium of communication was English. You can use that. You can use your OAT score. You can use your IELTS score. I had this score, and this can highlight that you have excellent spoken and written English communication skills, right? Then teamwork and collaboration. These two words should be present in your supporting information at all costs. Now, again, examples for teamwork would include, for example, let's say you worked in the ER during your house job or FI1, and in that you liaised with your consultants, nurses, radiologists, other staff like pharmacists, and also with other specialties. For example, there's a head injury patient, you used to liaise with the neurosurgery department, or if there was a patient with ACS, you used to liaise with cardiology department. So you can say that I have experience of working in teams, or if there was any team project that you did, for example, let's say any research project, or you conducted an audit in which you were a part of team. So you can say that I worked with my seniors and juniors on a research project. This was my role, and that gave me a wonderful insight into teamwork. And I understand the importance of teamwork as well. So you can give any example like that. Then again, you should know and understand your limitations, and you should behave according to that. For example, if you're an FI1, you should not be going and taking complex decisions for the patients. For example, deciding that they should have end of life care, or deciding that they should have palliative care, or go and break bad news to them without any consultation with your seniors. That's not your job description. Okay. So that's now, how are you going to demonstrate your limitations? For example, you can give example that now again, these are just examples that I'm giving, but you should not copy any of these examples. You should think about what you have done and take examples from your real life, because again, we don't want to give generic examples. Anyone can give such examples as well. So let's say you countered a patient of acute exacerbation of COPD that was not improving despite initial treatment, and you immediately escalated it to your senior, and you told them that I escalated this to my senior, that despite giving initial management, the patient PCO2 is not improving, and in fact patient is going into more and more respiratory acidosis. Now this patient might need some other intervention. That's why you recognize that this is beyond my role now, and you escalated this immediately to your senior. Next one would be flexible. Now this is again a very important point. This would help you get highlighted. For example, you can say that I'm flexible with timings, which means that whenever required of me, I can take up additional work, and I'm willing to offer my services beyond my job description if it is required for patient priority or patient betterment, or if the situation demands. For example, you can say that there was a period during my FI1, or later on if you worked as a medical officer somewhere or had a training slot, there was shortage of doctors, and there was a gap in the rota. Now I volunteered in that case to take up some of the locum job opportunities, or work as a locum doctor in additional hours in order to fill up the rota gaps. Or let's say you volunteered in some other capacity, like there was nobody to teach the medical students because of staff shortage, and you volunteered to teach the medical students for X amount of time, and therefore you were willing to take up additional work. So that can be a very desirable quality. Then leadership and management. Let's say you worked as a rota coordinator, or you worked as, again, list in charge. That is also something that you can mention. Or let's say you work in societies which include the photography societies or dramatic societies, and you had some leadership or management role. You organized events. You can mention all of that. So I can organize tasks. Patient priority and patient safety. Let's say you give example that now this is again very important point to address in your supporting information. Now patient safety example could be, let's say there was a patient that was allergic to penicillin, but you recognized it straight away when you were going through the prescription. You highlighted it, escalated it to your senior, and told them the patient was wrongly prescribed a penicillin based antibiotic, and patient could have a potential allergic reaction to that. And not just that, you went to the patient and told them about the potential error that could have happened. Or you can give some other examples out of your own experience. Another very important thing that I would want to highlight here is prioritization of tasks. You need to talk about that as well, especially if you are applying for an emergency role. Then you need to talk about prioritization of tasks. And the example you can give here, for example, I was working in emergency department during my FI1, and I used to make sure that I prioritize patients according to the severity of the condition. Or when I participated in the on-call rota during my cardiology rotation or whatever, I used to, when I got handover, I used to prioritize my tasks according to the urgency of the matter, because this is again a very important quality that you need to have if you want to work here in the NHS.